Welcome, Maria, to another episode of Just a Spanish Phrase.
Thank you, Renzo. How are you today?
I'm great. And of course, I'm coming today ready with a question for you.
Of course. Go
Okay.
ahead, shoot.
All right. So, obviously, this is related to the phrase that we will be exploring today. In Just a Spanish Phrase, we take a Spanish phrase, an idiom, an expression, and we unpack it. We look at the origins, the history, and then if you want to listen to it, used in real conversation, you can listen to one of our episodes at News in Slow Spanish.
Now, I have a question for you first.
Oh, okay.
Will you first tell me the phrase or will you first ask me the question?
It's unpredictable with me, isn't it? Because I do not keep my mouth shut. I love to talk and I ramble. So that is what is my question is about today. Can you think of an example where it's better to keep your mouth shut? In other words, to not say anything at all.
I do many examples, of course, from personal life to politics. But yesterday, I read an interesting article about a travel journalist who was saying, I just came back from Kyoto and I had a beautiful time, but my favorite place of all the places I visited in Kyoto was a small little tavern that was unknown to the majority of the tourists. And that is why it was so quaint. You know, a mom and dad little shop.
Mhm.
And she was asking herself in the article, what is my responsibility as a travel journalist? Should I say, this is a place I found that is amazing, and then make that place become super popular and pretty much lose all its
And ruin
charm?
it, right.
Or should I keep my mouth shut and continue enjoying of that authentic place?
Oh, that is such a tough question. And it makes me think of a perfect example that's so similar to that. But let's get back to that in a few minutes because, of course, we had to introduce the phrase. And in the spirit of keeping our mouth open, the phrase for today is en boca cerrada no entran moscas.
In a how would you translate that? In a closed mouth, a fly cannot enter.
Exactly. Or I guess closed mouths don't let in flies.
So that means if you keep your mouth shut, you don't get in trouble. So better to keep it shut.
Exactly. Unless you like flies coming into your mouth, it has clearly a negative connotation. You don't want them flying into your mouth.
By the way, did you read the news of the friend of Prince William who swallowed actually not a fly, a bee, and he died recently playing polo. Yes.
Really?
Which I mean, I know it's very dark, and I don't think the expression came from that. But
I like to think that we stay into current events here at News in Slow Spanish. We keep up with the news, but I had not heard about that. That's horrible.
Yeah, I know.
I'm assuming that person was allergic.
I'm assuming too, but so I guess in boca cerrada no entran moscas.
Yeah.
And tampoco abejas, which are bees.
Yes, and so that reminds me of the origin of this phrase, which you're going to love this.
Go ahead.
It's so weird and fascinating. But okay, so there's really two side-by-side theories about the origin of this phrase, but both of them take us to Spain, okay? And specifically to the either 14th or 16th century. So first, let's look at the slightly less interesting, but still very cool, older version of the phrase. En boca cerrada no entran moscas appears in some texts dating back to the 14th century, specifically in Andalusia. So Arabian-occupied Andalusia. So the prevailing theory there is that it is a phrase that comes from Arabic and that it's very old, and it's just an old wisdom that was transferred onto Spanish. The idea that, of course, if you keep your mouth shut, flies won't come into your mouth. And as you said, it means keep your mouth shut or choose not to speak and you won't get in trouble. But if you skip forward a couple of centuries to the 16th century and the reign of Charles I, King of Spain, now he was known, along with many other members of that dynasty, for having some physical deformities, a product of the inbreeding of that
era. Yeah,
yes.
Very common.
So Charles I had a very pronounced prognatism, a malformation of the jaw, which made his lower jaw stick out beyond, so basically an underbite. But it was a condition that grew worse and worse with age. So as he got older, that deformity in his jaw got more and more pronounced, to the point where when he was an adult, he always had his mouth open. Like he couldn't fully close his mouth. So he walked around, he lived his life with his mouth partially opened. So the legend says that one day he was visiting one of his kingdoms in Spain, and a subject approaches him and says, "Excuse me, Your Majesty, close your mouth, because they say the flies in this part of the kingdom are very naughty."
Ooh.
Now,
He should have kept, that person should have
Yes.
kept their mouth shut.
Yes, exactly. Now, this very brave subject, of course, I think was the moral of this story, of this legend, is that he was being very brave and telling the king to keep his mouth shut. Of course, it was an insult because he physically could not close his mouth, but it was, a commentary on the things, the outrageous things that the monarchy would say when they visited one of the smaller kingdoms. But yeah, I
That
can
is
imagine he got into a lot of
fascinating.
trouble.
And that makes me think of also some, you know how I love moral dilemmas, right? It's like when you love somebody and that person, let's say the zipper is open, you let them know, hey, your zipper is open because it's your friend,
Yeah.
right?
Or you have food in your mouth.
Or you have food in your mouth. Like it's usually an act of love. But do
Yeah.
you think brutal honesty is always an act of love?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Because it makes me think of romantic relationships.
Exactly. Sometimes diplomacy is the act of love. You don't
Yes.
always have to be brutally honest.
That's a perfect example that sometimes in boca cerrada no entran moscas. If you just keep your mouth shut, if you don't say something, you can't get in trouble for it.
Exactly. Like sometimes it's better to keep certain secrets, or do you have to share everything with your loved ones? From, hey honey, you have gained some weight, to, hey, no, that outfit doesn't
That
look
doesn't
good.
look good on you,
I
right?
read somewhere, I don't remember where, that if it's something the person can change, maybe you can say something, but if
Yeah.
it's something the person cannot change, maybe you shouldn't say something. But there's no rules, there's no mathematical
No.
law, but it's an interesting dilemma.
But I heard someone tell me once that it's not a secret unless it has ill intent. That if it's made out of, if it's keeping a bit of information away from someone out of love, like honestly a selfless act, then it's an omission, not a secret.
My mom used to call it mentiritas blancas.
White lies.
A little white lie.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I'm late, not because I was stuck in traffic. I'm late because I had a cat in my lap that I was petting, or like, I'm late because I didn't really want to come to this party, but I had to. So, it took me a lot of effort to come to the party.
Yeah.
You don't say those things.
No, I guess in that case, it would be better to just keep your mouth shut.
En boca cerrada,
No entran moscas.
no entran moscas.
An English equivalent, I guess, would be silence is golden. Have you heard that one?
Yeah, but do you think it's an equivalent?
It's tricky. It's tricky because silence is golden, to me, has more of an air of wisdom, like the power of silence.
Exactly. And to me, how silence nowadays is actually a luxury. I don't know if you have noticed, it's more and more difficult to find places where there is silence.
Mm-hmm.
And not absolute silence. I think we talk here about the room they created in Washington, D.C. that is actually completely deprived of sound camera.
Oh.
Like a place where there's really, really no sound at all. And it's unbearable, apparently.
I bet.
But I'm
True
talking about the
silence.
silence, the silence of nature, the silence of being in the woods and not listening to cars, trains, planes, people talking, like
Yeah.
enjoy the silence.
Yeah.
So silence is golden, is a luxury of modern times.
Oh, interesting. I see. It makes me think of, bringing it back to politics, which is something we're no strangers to in this podcast. The power of silence, like silent protest, like a sit-in. Have you ever remember that style of protest? Now, recently we had some national protests here in the United States. Last weekend, the No Kings movement.
Yes.
Now, that was not silent.
That was not silent. And sometimes silent protests are more powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a whole other topic for another 20 minutes
I
of
know.
the power and the effectiveness of protests.
But I do want to say, staying on the subject of protests and this expression, because it is different than silence is golden. And I think I understand why. En boca cerrada no entran moscas is more about staying out of trouble. Like not rocking the boat. That's an example. It's similar. But the feeling behind it is similar. It's avoiding the thing that will get you in trouble. And that's one of the things that I'm worried about in this country, that some people, whether it's journalists or would-be protesters,
Professors, students,
that feel like they need to stay silent because they're afraid of political persecution, of getting canceled,
and in that case, silence is not golden. It's
No.
actually very dark
So
kind
I
of silence.
I think with that, we'll end our episode today, and we'll promise our listeners that we're going to keep our mouths open, even if sometimes we let some flies in.
Let's do that.
Let's do that.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. And if you like this podcast, remember to leave a comment and subscribe and share it with your friends. Bye.
Bye.